Welcome to Balmer's Workshop. Thanks so much for joining me here once again. It's always great to have you back. So last time we completed part one of the front skid plate build for this little Mitsubishi with those tension rod covers, and of course that's exactly where we're going to pick up this time. So without further ado, let's roll right on into the build. If you haven't checked out part one, then obviously please do go back and have a look at that first. All right, time to jump ahead a little bit with this video. As you can see, I've got the skid plate itself made up in steel now. I sent this out to my supplier. I drew it out on the CAD program like I said I would, and sent that out for cutting and forming, and I added my logo in here as I normally do. And I've given myself those ears off of this side like we had on the mock-up so that I can add in my covers for these tension rods. And I didn't send those designs out for forming because I wanted to get this part done first and then make sure that they fit this exactly right before I went ahead and sent them out for forming. So now that I've got the skid plate itself all formed up in steel, I can use my Plasticor mock-ups again to make sure that everything still fits really nice and accurate. And then the equipment I have in shop is big enough to be able to handle these pieces, at least in terms of I can freehand plasma cut them out and then I can form them in my press, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. But now that I've got this nice solid piece to work with, it's going to be a whole lot easier to move forward. So let me grab those cover pieces and show you kind of the evolution of how that worked out. So I wound up moving through about 3 of these guys, or 4, yeah, 4 in the end, because these are the first attempts. The final one is actually sitting over on the bench, and I'll show you everything that was involved with that. So I modeled everything on this side of the vehicle so they all correspond here, and then of course I just mirrored them over to the other side. I believe this is the first one that I started with, and that was just enough to give me this kind of beginning angle and obviously make sure my dimension was right there. But the issue was, I had mentioned earlier in the video, I thought I might sweep this part back a little bit, that it would look cool, and I think it would look cool, but that wound up being super complex because there's a bend in here. If this had been a straight line, then a flat piece would have fit in nicely and it would have formed a cool angle on the front there. But because there's this bend, it would take 2 pieces to build it, and it's just making things even more complex. So I just went ahead and went flat. So what I did is I just took a straight edge and I went straight down from my mock-up and drew along. So basically I knew, and then I measured back to these points so that I knew how much material to add when I copied this onto my next piece. So in here, you know, looking at it now, I have approximately 2.5 inches at this point and about 1 inch back at that point. So when I copied this again onto a new piece of coroplast, in fact, you can see my numbers there. It's 2 inches here and only a 1/4 inch there that I had to add to come out to a flat surface here, which is what I made this guy from. So I made that, rechecked it, and it was almost perfect, but I was back by about 3/8 of an inch there. I tried another correction. I don't know, I must have made a really small adjustment because I still needed 5/16. So this one was almost identical to the last. I think I was tired and it was the end of the day. But finally, I got it done, and I'll go get that one now. And here's the final one. So that fits in really nicely. Oops, if I could hold it straight, it would fit in really nicely. And it's dead flat the whole way across. It actually sits about like that. Once I was happy with that, I had it taped in place, of course. Once I was happy with that, I built myself a front plate for it, or cap. The cap wound up being a little short here, and I just made myself an indication to extend that when I turned it into steel. And I have done that, and those pieces are sitting on the bench. I've already cut and formed one side of these, but we'll cut and form the other side together. All right, back to the bench. I've got myself a scrap piece of 3/16 steel, which I'm going to use to cut my templates out from, and they both fit in there really nicely, so there'll be no issues there. I chose 3/16 material. It's a little thick, to be honest. I probably could have gone with 1/8 or 10 gauge, but 3/16 is nice and robust, so it'll be at least as strong as it needs to be. So I'm just going to put a piece of angle iron against the back so that I've got a nice straight edge to hold my template in place. And then I can simply trace it out and cut it out. And with this one, I have a blunt end on here. It's supposed to come to a point, so I'll just finish that line with a straight edge. And there we go. Ready for cutting out. So I'm going to use a freehand plasma to cut these. It's quick and easy. You don't have to have a plasma for this, of course. You can cut it just as easily with a zip disc on an angle grinder. And there we are. They're cut out and ready for forming, or at least this one's ready for forming. That doesn't need forming. I should have mentioned that before I go ahead and bend these, I'm going to take off all the nitriding on the edges that's happened thanks to the plasma cutting and give myself a nice clean edge for weld up. And of course, I also have to mark my line for bending, and I'm going to use my template to measure that out. I've marked on there that it's 150 degree bend, 180 degrees, 150 degrees-ish, 90 degrees, you get the idea. So what I'm going to do for that is simply, to mark my edge, simply turn that guy over that way, again place straight edge against there, and simply fold my coroplast mock-up upwards and mark just, instead of marking right on that edge, I'm going to mark about a 1/16 of an inch away from it, just like so. Double check that nothing moved, and we should be good to go. That line isn't perfectly straight, so I'm just going to go over it with a straight edge. Actually, it's pretty good. Pretty good. Now we'll go to the press and bend that. And away we go. Oh, hang on. I may have marked the wrong side. I need to be making a mirror image. I think I marked the wrong side. That was lucky. I'll be back. Rewind. I almost made a big mistake. This is a 150 degree bend, just as I noted, except that because this is for the other side of the vehicle now, I've already made one. Here's the one that's made according to this template. So that's ready to go, and there's a cap for it. But I don't want two for that side of the vehicle. I want one for each side of the vehicle, of course. So what I need to do is bend this the other way. Well, I can't reasonably bend it the other way because it's just not going to work. So what we do is simply cut along the line, nice and straight. And then we can use this guy to mark our angle. Whoops. To mark our angle. And I think that's correct. Yes, that will be correct. All right, that's our bend line, not that. All right, so now that I'm at the press, I should mention this is just a 20-ton shop press, your standard shop press, and I've just built a top and bottom die for bending. They're made out of 2-inch by 1/4 inch angle iron, top and bottom. A pretty straightforward design. It's a handy little thing for a home shop if anybody's interested to make their own. And all you got to do is make sure you're on your line, which I am. Make sure your material is centered to the die, to the bottom die. Make sure your top die is centered to your bottom die, and you're ready to go. And we are looking for a 150 degree angle, which means 30 degrees of bend. And what I can do is go and grab my cap and kind of hold it up in place and see if I think that it looks close to the right angle. And we definitely need to go more than that yet. That's looking pretty close. I might give myself just a little extra because it's easy to open it up again in the vise. It's not that big of a deal to bend it more in here either, but I'm gonna go that little bit extra. All right, let's see what we've got. So I need to go a little more yet. So as you saw, I found it easiest just to tack this tension rod cover on in place straight away without any bother or messing around trying to pre-fit it. Fit up really well. I just used an angling magnet here, and I used an arrow magnet at the bottom just to hold it in place ever so slightly, and it's worked out well. The cap fits quite nicely. Tiny little bit of a gap, but barely. That'll work out just fine. And I'll take you off the tripod now so you can have a look at the clearances around there. Okay, hopefully you can see half decently in there that there is, I would say, a ½ inch of clearance between pretty well every point of the tensioning rod and the skid plate at a minimum. So that's, you know, kind of a perfect tolerance, I would say. We'll just plate that little back part when we're done, and all as well. So now I'm going to add that cap on. We'll just tack it in place as well. And there we go. All right, that worked out well. It's dead flush. We got a little bit of an overhang right there, but I'll just sand that off once I have the, sorry about the perspective there. I'll just sand that off once we have the skid plate off the vehicle. We'll weld this up fully. I think I'll weld it in place. Right here, I'm gonna have to open up some weld prep with a zip disc, just give myself about 1/8 of an inch gap in there, and maybe even right here a little bit as well. But otherwise, we're good to go weld prep wise, so I can just weld it all up. So I'll zip disc in here, weld it in place, obviously do the other side as well. We'll remove it from the vehicle. We'll drill out these last 2 holes that I forgot to add to the CAD design, and this thing is pretty much a wrap. Well, I think it is done. You saw me mess around with the M there. There was just a little error in the plasma cutting, so I just corrected that. It had cut into this part a little bit, and then the rest of this was cropped out a little bit. So I just welded up the little gap and blended out or sanded out the outcropping there, but looks good now. I ran a straight edge along my welds so that I could just have a bit of an edge to look at while I was welding, because it's very tough to see the crack in these guys. So I wanted to make sure I did a really nice straight bead, so that's why I used a straight edge along there, something to just use as a bit of a guide. I blended these welds out to give a nice radius corner, but of course I'm going to leave the inside welds there. And I think it is pretty well done. Let me throw on a glove, and then I'll turn this plate over. It's still hot. There's the backside. I'm not going to do backside welds. The Pajero Mini is definitely never going to be able to smash those apart, I'm sure of that much. So we'll do front side welds only this time and leave it at that. But she's pretty well done. Oh, I still have to put those holes in, and I've blended out, or I've sanded out the lines that I had on there originally. So I'm going to have to mount it back up, redraw those lines, and then we'll drill those holes out, and that is the end of it. After that, it can go to powder coat and off to the customer. But let's put it back on the vehicle and have a final look. And it's done. That was a lot of work for a little skid plate, but I think it's turned out really well. The center section is tucked up as tight as it can reasonably be. It's got a nice logo. It's well secured. It's got the little outcroppings to protect the tension rods, if that's what they're called. They've got plenty of room, but not too much. And it's a rock solid piece that's form fitting and suits the vehicle really well, I think. Kind of a cool design, something you don't see every day. My customer has certainly done well with this one in the sense that I have put in way more time than I can possibly charge for. Some jobs really are just not worth doing, and this would be one of them, except that this customer is a very, very good return customer who I know will be made very happy with this piece. So in the end, it will be worth it. But from now on, they'll be done on CAD design if anybody else wants one, so it's going to be a whole lot easier on me. And just like that, it's back from powder coat, along with a whole bunch of other goodies. So let's unwrap it and see how it looks. And there it is, unwrapped and ready for install. Turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself. Welds look decent. And we got a nice form-fitting, super rugged skid plate for this little Pajero, however you say it, Mini. So let's put it up on the hoist and get it installed. And there we are, installed. It's always tough to see these black components underneath a vehicle. And I've got some pretty good light going on, but I will lift the vehicle a little higher and get the light right under there to give you a slightly better view. There you are. Emblazoned with the Balmer logo, a little bit dusty still, but looking good. Really happy with how that turned out. Like I said earlier in the video, this was a massive amount of work really for what it is. But sometimes it's worth putting in the effort for a wonderful customer and to create a product that now I can reproduce if I want to. And there's a lot of job satisfaction in creating something that you like yourself. And I do like this skid plate. I think it looks really good. So that is pretty much a wrap. This thing can expect some serious trail protection in all the areas that we've already discussed. And I hope my customer likes it as much as I do. A big thumbs up to you for making it to the end of another video. Thank you so much for joining me here once again. I would love a return on that thumbs up if you feel that the video was worthy. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider that as well. Thank you so much for joining me here again. Take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones. We'll see you again next time.